You know that Leonardo da Vinci, who was considered one of the greatest geniuses of all time, was likely ADHD? Two Italian researchers analyzed his life and found out that his behaviors and his thoughts at the time were very coherent with what we call today ADHD. Well, first of all, Leonardo da Vinci did not have a single interest. He is known for a lot of things, for his writings, for his works on anatomy, for his architecture, for his engineering, for his paintings, for his sculptures, and also for his music. This was because he had a very curious and creative mind, but also because he could not really focus on one single thing and was constantly distracted, something that gained him the reputation of being unreliable and constantly doing new things without ever finishing his projects. His first biographer, Giorgio Vasari, described him this way: "In learning and in the rudiments of letters, he would have made great proficiency if he had not been so variable and unstable, for he set himself to learn many things and then, after having begun them, abandoned them." His troubles with hyperactivity and distraction began when he was a child and then continued during adolescence. At that time, he went to study in Florence under Andrea Verrocchio, that was a true Renaissance man and was being commissioned for a lot of art. Now, Leonardo himself was being commissioned for a lot of stuff, but he never actually finished any of the projects. Many, he just spent a lot of time planning them, but could never really bring himself to even start them. This is why he was not an independent artist until he was 26, which was very late at the time. For reference, at the same age, Raphael had completed more than 80 paintings and also had done a fresco for the Vatican. The novelist Matteo Bandello, a contemporary of Leonardo, described his behavior when he was working on The Last Supper. "I have also seen him, as the caprice or whim took him, set out at midday from the Corte Vecchio, where he was at work on the clay model of the Great Horse, and go straight to the Grazie, and there mount on the scaffolding, take up his brush and give one or two touches to one of the figures, and suddenly give up and go away again." His unreliability in finishing project was so well known that when he went to work for Ludovico il Moro, the Duke of Milan at the time, he even was made to sign a contract to ensure that he would deliver his project on time. And after 20 years of service, Leonardo himself admitted that he never even finished one. The paper describes him this way: "Perhaps the most disruptive side of his mind was a voracious curiosity, which both propelled his creativity and distracted him from keeping a steady path to completion." Leonardo avoided tasks that required a sustained mental effort. For example, his reluctance to work with fresco paintings was well known, so much that to avoid doing that, he tried experimenting a lot with pigments, which ruined a lot of his paintings and almost ruined The Last Supper. Leonardo was well aware of his shortcomings. He knew that he had an issue, so he tried to compensate by constantly teaming up with others. For example, the professor Marcantonio della Torre, that was a professor at the University of Pavia, and with whom Leonardo did all of his works on anatomy. However, after a few months, the professor died of the plague, and Leonardo abandoned that as well. He also wrote in his diary, completely disheartened, "It is easier to resist at the beginning than at the end." Leonardo also used a lot of excuses to mark his shortcomings and save himself the embarrassment or the humiliation or other consequences that could be at the time if you didn't finish work. One famous example is when he was working on The Last Supper and still hadn't finished, the Duke of Milan came to see him and asked him why it wasn't finished. And so Leonardo explained that he wasn't finding someone that looked enough the scoundrel in the jails of Milan so that he could model for Judas. Now, the Duke laughed and let Leonardo work at his own leisure, but others were not so forgiving. For example, when Leonardo was employed by the Vatican, the Pope grew so frustrated that he said, "Alas, this man will never do anything, for he begins by thinking of the end of the work before the beginning." Leonardo stayed at the Vatican for only 3 years and was one of the only ones of his contemporaries that didn't leave a trace there. When he was 64 and he had nowhere to go because no one wanted to work with him anymore, the King of France took him under his wing. And so he took a lot of his paintings to France, including one that wasn't finished, the Mona Lisa. Now, according to a lot of his contemporaries, he meant well. He really wanted to satisfy his customers. He just could never bring himself to do it or to just finish his work, or even sometimes start them. On top of all of his symptoms that include lack of time management, lack of organization, distractibility, hyperactivity, and a lot of curiosity, Leonardo also had other conditions and comorbidities. He likely was dyslexic because he made a lot of mistakes even in his own writings, even though a lot of people said that he knew how to perfectly write because he was a master at that. He also had an atypical hemispheric dominance, and he was left-handed. And these things are most prevalent in people that have neurological conditions like ADHD. There's also evidence that his unique brain structure negatively impacted his life. There wasn't a single person that didn't consider him unreliable, so it severely impacted his quality of relationships. But it also impacted his life and his economies, because since he didn't manage to finish any single project, he wasn't getting paid a lot, and he was one of the poorest artists among all of his contemporaries, like Raphael. He was not just a misunderstood genius that was too advanced for his time. He was actually well understood, it's just that he never managed to finish anything that he set himself to because of his distractibility. And he himself was very also frustrated and angry at his own brain, and he wrote many times in his diary that he felt that he had faulted God for not being able to complete everything he wanted to. But 500 years later, we remember him for his curiosity and for his many varied interests. And we don't really see all the struggles that he had to go through because of his unique brain structure that likely would have been diagnosed as ADHD today. So Leonardo, jack of all trades, master of none, but oftentimes better than just a master of one.